Hi guys, today we are going to find out, what if Vikings colonized America first? You're standing on the deck of a longship, salt spray stinging your face as towering waves crash over the bow. The year is 982 AD, and you're part of Eric the Red's expanded fleet, pushing beyond Greenland into the unknown Western Ocean. Your hands grip the ship's rail as seasoned warriors around you vomit into buckets, their legendary toughness no match for the Atlantic's fury. You probably won't survive this journey. Statistically speaking, half of Viking ocean expeditions never returned home. The wooden hull creaks ominously beneath your feet as another massive wave threatens to swamp your vessel entirely. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you're at it, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where this alternate history finds you. The storm finally breaks after 3 hellish days, revealing a coastline that will change everything. Dense forests stretch endlessly inland, and you smell something your Norse ancestors never experienced: the rich, untamed wilderness of North America. Now, sit back and let's dive into today's alternate journey together. You beach your longship on what will one day be called Newfoundland, but today it's simply the edge of Midgard, the world's end made real. You drag your longship further inland, muscles burning as your crew hauls the heavy vessel beyond the tide's reach. The beach beneath your boots is unlike anything in Norway. Soft sand mixed with strange shells and driftwood from unknown trees. Within hours, you're constructing the first permanent Norse structure in America, a simple longhouse using local timber. The wood feels different under your axe, denser and more resinous than the familiar pine and oak of Scandinavia. Your stomach gnaws with hunger as you realize the magnitude of this challenge. No stored grain, no familiar fishing grounds, and winter approaching fast. The few provisions you brought won't last a month, and return to Greenland before spring is impossible. You watch your companions scatter across the landscape, some hunting unfamiliar game while others gather berries that might be poisonous. Every decision could mean survival or death for the entire colony. The first night brings sounds you've never heard, haunting calls from the deep forest and rustling that could be wind or something much more dangerous. You sleep fitfully, one hand always on your sword hilt. By the second week, you've established basic shelter and found a freshwater stream. But the reality hits hard. You're no longer raiders or traders passing through foreign lands. You're settlers now, completely dependent on this strange new world for everything you need to survive. The morning mist parts to reveal figures watching you from the tree line, your first glimpse of the people who already call this land home. Their clothing, posture, and weapons are completely foreign, yet their cautious curiosity mirrors your own. You approach slowly, hands visible but ready to draw steel if needed. The lead figure steps forward, and you realize this moment will determine whether your colony thrives or dies in its infancy. Communication becomes a desperate pantomime of gestures and simple objects. You offer iron tools, they present furs and dried meat. Neither group fully trusts the other, but mutual benefit creates an uneasy truce. Within days, you're learning their methods for surviving this harsh landscape. Which plants provide medicine, how to track unfamiliar animals, and where to find the best fishing spots along the coast. But tension escalates when more Vikings arrive from Greenland, bringing aggressive warriors who view the natives as obstacles rather than potential allies. You watch helplessly as misunderstandings spark the first violent clashes. Blood spills on both sides during a dispute over fishing rights, and you realize the delicate balance you'd established is crumbling. The natives retreat deeper into the forest, taking their invaluable knowledge with them. Your colony now faces a cruel choice: pursue aggressive expansion like your warrior culture demands, or maintain peaceful coexistence that ensures survival but limits growth. The decision you make here will echo through centuries. You watch as Eric's son Leif leads the first major expansion south, establishing new settlements along what will become the Maine and Massachusetts coasts. Each new colony represents both opportunity and enormous risk. The Norse foothold grows methodically as you help construct fortified trading posts every 50 miles along the shoreline. These aren't temporary camps anymore. They're permanent beachheads with defensive walls and storage facilities. Your shipbuilding skills prove invaluable as the colony develops a fleet specifically designed for coastal navigation. These smaller, more maneuverable vessels allow rapid communication between settlements and quick response to threats. The population swells as word reaches Scandinavia, about this new land of opportunity. Families arrive with livestock, craftsmen bring specialized tools, and you witness the transformation from desperate survival to organized colonization. You establish the first successful farms using hybrid techniques, Norse animal husbandry combined with indigenous crop rotation methods learned from friendlier tribes. The harvest yields are better than anything back in Greenland. Trade networks emerge as you exchange Norse iron goods and woolen textiles for native copper, obsidian, and exotic furs. These commercial relationships create the economic foundation that will sustain long-term settlement. By your 10th year in America, you count over 2,000 Norse settlers spread across 15 major settlements. What started as Eric's desperate gamble has become an irreversible Viking conquest of the New World's eastern edge. You witness something unprecedented in Viking history. Your warriors learning to hunt with bows instead of relying solely on axes and spears. The indigenous hunting techniques prove far more effective in America's dense forests. Norse children born in Vinland speak a hybrid language, mixing Old Norse with native words for plants, animals, and concepts that don't exist in Scandinavian vocabulary. You're watching the birth of a new culture. Your traditional Norse longhouse architecture evolves as builders incorporate indigenous construction methods using bark, earth insulation, and sophisticated ventilation systems better suited to America's climate extremes. The old gods adapt to new landscapes as you participate in rituals honoring both Thor and native spirits of the forest. Religious syncretism emerges naturally when survival depends on understanding every aspect of your environment. You learn to make maple syrup, smoke unfamiliar fish species, and preserve meat using native techniques that prove superior to traditional Norse methods. Your diet becomes healthier and more varied than anything possible in Scandinavia. Intermarriage between Norse settlers and indigenous peoples creates a generation of children who navigate both worlds effortlessly. These hybrid families become crucial diplomatic bridges between cultures. Your clothing transforms as you adopt native materials, leather from American animals, dyes from local plants, and weaving techniques that produce warmer, more durable garments perfectly adapted to the continental climate. You join the first expedition to push beyond the coastal mountains, following river valleys that lead deep into the continental interior. The scale of this land becomes truly apparent as you travel for weeks without seeing its end. Your party discovers vast deposits of copper in what will one day be called the Great Lakes region, resources that dwarf anything available in Europe. The implications for Norse metalworking and trade are staggering. You establish the first inland trading posts, creating supply lines that stretch over 1,000 miles from the Atlantic coast. Native tribes become essential partners, providing guides and protection for these ambitious ventures. The fur trade explodes as you tap into continental networks that bring pelts from as far west as the Rocky Mountains. Norse merchants become incredibly wealthy, funding even larger expeditions and permanent settlements. You witness the construction of the first overland routes. Not roads exactly, but maintain trails with supply caches and fortified waypoints that allow regular communication between coastal and interior settlements. Rivers become highways as you develop specialized boats for inland navigation. These vessels carry Norse goods upstream and return loaded with furs, copper, and exotic materials never seen in Europe. Your maps expand dramatically as each expedition pushes further west, revealing a continent of impossible vastness. You realize that America contains more usable land than all of Europe combined. By the 20th year of colonization, Norse influence extends from the Atlantic to the Mississippi River, creating the largest territorial expansion in Viking history. You witness Leif Erikson proclaiming himself the first Jarl of Vinland, establishing a formal Norse kingdom with its own laws, currency, and military structure independent from Greenland and Norway. The Thing assemblies adapt to American conditions as you participate in democratic councils that now include representatives from dozens of settlements scattered across the continent. Your voice helps shape laws for this new world. You observe the rise of powerful Norse American dynasties as successful traders and explorers accumulate vast wealth and land holdings. These families begin to see themselves as American nobles rather than European colonists. Regional jarls emerge to govern different territories, the coastal jarl controlling Atlantic settlements, the river jarl managing inland trade routes, and the mountain jarl overseeing mining operations in the interior. You help establish the first Norse American military academy, training warriors specifically for continental warfare rather than traditional Viking raids. These soldiers learned cavalry tactics and siege warfare from indigenous allies. The capital city of New Trondheim rises at the mouth of the Hudson River, featuring stone buildings, organized streets, and a population exceeding 10,000 Norse settlers and their indigenous allies. You watch as Norse law evolves to incorporate indigenous legal concepts like collective land ownership and restorative justice, creating a hybrid legal system unique to America. By the 30th year, three distinct Norse kingdoms have emerged: Vinland in the northeast, Markland along the Great Lakes, and the newly established Helluland territory stretching toward the western plains. You're standing on the docks of New Trondheim when three strange ships appear on the horizon. Their sails bear unfamiliar crosses, and their hulls are built in a style you've never seen before. Christopher Columbus steps onto Norse soil in 1492, 500 years after your ancestors first landed, expecting to find spice islands, but instead discovering a thriving Viking civilization that controls half of North America. The Spanish conquistador's shock is palpable as you translate his demands for gold and submission into Old Norse, explaining that this land already belongs to established kingdoms with their own armies and alliances. You witness the first diplomatic meeting between European powers and Norse America, as Columbus realizes he cannot simply claim this territory for Spain. The Vikings have cities, trade networks, and military strength that rival European nations. Spanish attempts at conquest fail catastrophically when they encounter Norse-trained cavalry units fighting alongside indigenous warriors who know every trail and river crossing in the vast American interior. The balance of global power shifts as you watch other European nations, England, France, and Portugal, scramble to establish footholds on a continent where Vikings have already claimed the most valuable territories and trade routes. You participate in the Treaty of New Trondheim in 1501, where Norse America formally establishes diplomatic relations with European powers as an equal nation rather than a colonial territory to be exploited. The age of European colonial dominance never truly begins, as three-way competition between Spanish, English, and Norse empires creates a completely different dynamic in the New World. You observe the fascinating religious evolution as Norse paganism, Christianity, and indigenous spiritual practices create entirely new belief systems unique to America, with Thor adapting to become a protector of the vast forests. Christian missionaries arriving with European expeditions find themselves in theological debates with Norse priests, who've already incorporated concepts of sacrifice, redemption, and afterlife from multiple traditions into their evolving faith. You participate in the Great Synod of 1515, where Norse America officially adopts a hybrid Christianity that maintains traditional festivals, allows clerical marriage, and recognizes indigenous sacred sites as legitimate holy places. The social structure transforms as you witness the emergence of a distinctly American Norse nobility, jarls whose power comes from land ownership and trade relationships rather than raiding and conquest. You see how intermarriage over 5 centuries has created a population that's genetically and culturally distinct from both European Norse and indigenous peoples, truly becoming the first Americans in a way that transcends tribal or national origins. Educational systems develop as you help establish the first universities in New Trondheim and Markland City, where scholars study everything from indigenous medicine to European philosophy alongside traditional Norse law and history. Women's roles evolve significantly as Norse traditions of female property ownership combine with indigenous concepts of matrilineal leadership, creating unprecedented gender equality for the medieval world. You witness the birth of American Norse literature as poets and storytellers create new sagas celebrating continental adventures rather than European raids, fundamentally changing how your people define heroism. You stand in the Great Hall of New Trondheim in 1600, watching as Norse America celebrates its 6th century of continuous civilization, now home to over 500,000 people spread across a territory larger than medieval Europe. The global implications become clear as you observe how Viking America's existence prevented Spanish monopolization of New World wealth, creating a multipolar world where no single European power could dominate global trade. You witness the technological revolution as Norse smiths combine European metallurgy with indigenous knowledge and American resources, producing innovations that flow back to influence European development rather than the reverse. The democratic traditions established in your Thing assemblies inspire European political reformers, as news of American Norse governance systems challenges absolute monarchy and contributes to Enlightenment thinking centuries ahead of schedule. You participate in the First Pan-American Congress in 1650, where Norse kingdoms negotiate with Spanish colonies, English settlements, and indigenous nations as equals, creating a continental balance of power unknown in our timeline. The environmental impact differs dramatically as you observe sustainable Norse indigenous farming and forestry practices that maintain America's ecological health while supporting large populations, avoiding the devastating exploitation of European colonialism. Your descendants have become something entirely new, neither European nor indigenous, but authentically American in a way that transcends these categories, creating the world's first truly continental civilization. The Viking dream of Western expansion reaches its ultimate fulfillment, as you realize your people didn't just raid and retreat, they stayed, adapted, and built something permanent that changed the course of human history. As our alternate journey draws to a close, you find yourself contemplating the profound ripple effects of this single historical change. In this timeline, the devastating diseases that decimated indigenous populations were introduced gradually over centuries, allowing for adaptation and survival rather than catastrophic collapse. The world map looks fundamentally different, with North America standing as a major power alongside Spain, England, and France, creating a four-way global competition that prevented any single empire from achieving total dominance. Perhaps most significantly, the concept of America as a new world to be conquered and exploited never fully developed, since Vikings found established civilizations and had to negotiate rather than simply take. The democratic ideals that would eventually inspire the American Revolution emerged centuries earlier through Norse Thing traditions, fundamentally altering the timeline of human political development. This alternative history reminds us how contingent our world really is, how a few successful Viking expeditions could have reshaped global civilization in ways we can barely imagine. So here's my question for you. If you could change one moment in history to create a completely different world, what would it be and why?